Welcome back to another episode of the Multipliers Club, and today we're joined by another very special guest. That is KP, sat to my right. KP, if you just want to introduce yourself, what you do currently, what business you have.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for having me on the show. I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually really excited about this one. Actually, you know, as I was mentioning previously, I've done a few podcasts over the years, but this one I'm really looking forward to. You know, just spending some time with you boys as well.
That's
you know,
it.
So
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that.
We're privileged to have your time. You know?
Oh, bless you,
And you've come all the way to Ilford.
I know.
Sunny Ilford.
Check my passport as well. Us South London boys, you know, it's a different journey. But Joe, going back to what you're asking, so I'm KP. I'm a co-founder of Founders Club. My brother and I, we have a few other businesses as well, but that is where I am mainly positioned as a co-founder of Founders Club.
Yeah, and so just for the listeners, that is actually how we know KP. So it's a predominantly networking business, do you describe it as, I guess? Network now, quite heavily education as well. I know you're...
Yeah, you know, somebody was asking me this question actually, what is Founders Club?
Yeah, where do you put it?
Yeah, and essentially, you know what, even though, yes, of course, networking is a big part of it, but I really call it kind of a growth club. Do you know what I mean? Because that is one of the prerequisites for the club. If you don't have a growth mindset, it's probably not going to be the place for you.
100%.
You know, everyone, and when I say growth, it's not just personally, but professionally, you know, in every sense of the way, you know. So that's what really I call it kind of a growth club as opposed to a networking club. But networking is a big part of it.
Networking is a part, and that is how... So Jake, who I'm going to tell you now for the listeners, we did mention first episode we explained Jake's called Frank.
A lot of people know me as Frank, just because of work. So yeah, me and KP first met professionally. Now he's like a brother, but he still calls me Frank. So that's it.
I know him as Frank. Tomorrow I'm going to call him Batman.
Mr. Waters. That's what we sold, didn't it? There we go. There we go.
If in the podcast he calls you Frank, the listeners know.
Yeah, there's not an extra guest. It's me.
But yeah, so obviously Jake was part of Founders Club before us for a year. I think he was last year. Then at the end of year Christmas party, he sponsored one of the events, and so he got to bring 10 guests along, I think, business owners. So he brought myself, Luke, Sam, and some of our other friends.
Owners,
and all of us loved it, had a great time, got very drunk, met some great people, and then
some cool people in the room.
Yeah, some really cool people, and I loved it. And it was the first one I've been to like that, where obviously I know you're not calling it a straight networking event, but when you talk about just a networking event, I always thought it's a little bit, it's people that just go and shake hands and don't really ever get anything done, and it's, you know, it's kind of a lot of time wasting and all of that, and it completely changed my mind.
Had you been to a networking club before?
No, not really, not properly.
It's just your misconception
exactly
really of what it is, isn't it?
And I went and I thought, wow, this is incredible. Like, I was speaking to such great entrepreneurs. So yeah, we all joined up. This year we've been to a few events and it's really good, really enjoyed it. It's a great club to be a part of.
Jake, how did you meet KP?
That's how we know KP.
Originally.
Yeah, how did you meet?
Do you want to explain the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So we connected on Instagram, right?
Yeah, I can just tell the background of how I found you.
Go on.
So you actually told me.
You were a target.
Luke told me how to do it. So obviously in the marketing background. So he said, look at the hotels where people stay that are very high end. Obviously Suniva. Suniva Jani for you. It might have been the Suniva Jani or Suniva Fushi. It's Suniva Fushi. Yeah, one of them in the Maldives. If you don't know that hotel, look it up. It's unreal. It's one with the slides. Everyone knows one with the slides, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I thought they all had slides.
They do now. They do now. But Suniva was the first ones to introduce slides on villas straight into the ocean.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So they're very Instagrammable. Everyone knows them. So yeah, Luke told me to look at hotels, and then I looked for Suniva. Because I know you have to be very wealthy to go there, and I see KB was there, so I sent him a message, targeted marketing, and then the relationship blossomed. So you can take over.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where, you know, Frank reached out to me, obviously on Instagram, and that's how we just connected. And then I think it was a couple of years ago. That we carried on the conversation. There was something that I needed, wasn't there? There was something that I needed, and
Probably a flight.
Probably a flight or something. I can't remember.
No,
what
it was. I think it was a flight or something. Yeah. I just kept touching base. I touched base a few times, and it was actually strange. I looked for Suniva in the Maldives, but it just so happened you live 5 minutes up the road from my parents.
Yeah,
that's
right.
And
then 10 minutes up the road from me.
And
then because I see you posted about Croydon, and I was like, what Croydon? I was like,
In Maldives.
It's a man from Croydon in the Maldives.
I'm taking Croydon to the Maldives.
Croydon in the Maldives at the Suniva.
Could you maybe be the first man from Croydon to ever go to the Maldives?
I could be. You know, it's making sure I'm spreading that South London love. You know? So, no. That's how we met, and then since then, I'll tell you what it was. Is that Frank messaged me once, but then he was constantly, regularly kind of messaging me, just making sure, listen, if you need anything, let me know, just, you know, and that kind of stayed at the forefront of my mind, you know, and for me, look, I mean, through and through, ultimately, I'm just a glorified sales guy, right? That's my background. I'm a salesman. So, and there were so many things I learned in sales, and one of the first things I learned very, very young was the biggest reason why most people fail in sales is because they don't follow up.
Do you know what
I mean?
Fortune's in the follow-up, right?
Yeah. They send a proposal or they'll send an email and that's it. And then they'll sit there and wait until somebody responds back. But people don't follow up, right? So that's where most sales are lost. So, and I think with our situation, Frank was just constantly, do you know what I mean? Not every day, but every year. Yeah, I wouldn't even say no. Every kind of.
I think if it was travel related, then I'd
absolutely.
So on that note, just for the listeners and off your advice, following up, I think there's a fine line between A, being a pest, and B, looking desperate up front if you're looking for business or whatever. So, but obviously, like you just said, it's a big part of closing deals, of winning business, of staying at the forefront of people's minds. There's a balance. What's your advice on following up, how to do it successfully rather than looking, how I just said, desperate?
Absolutely. And I think that there's always kind of a rule of thumb, right? So if you send a proposal on a Monday afternoon, you know, don't follow it up on a Monday late afternoon. Give them a couple of days. You know, I always say to my team, you know, look, if you're sending something on a Monday, the biggest thing is put a deadline to it. So if I'm emailing you with a proposal and I'm saying, Joe, as promised, there is a proposal attached, you know, can you come back to me by Wednesday or Thursday or Friday? I'm giving you a deadline now. Do you know what I mean, right? So if I say, can you come back to me by Wednesday? So then, if I don't hear from you by Wednesday, I'm calling you. And I won't feel guilty about calling you because I put it in the email, can you come back to me by Wednesday? Do you see what I mean, right? So otherwise, you know, look, can we wrap this up by end of the week? See what I mean? So always put the deadline on it, and that way you don't feel embarrassed or anything like that about.
That's good. That's a good bit of advice.
So what about for just asking for myself? Obviously, within the my building company, let's say I send an estimate on a Monday, would you still? Let's say I send an estimate for 300k or 200, whatever size job, but quite a big job. They need time. They need to think. Do you still just say maybe just give them a longer deadline? Like, could you let me know by next week, or should we have a catch up next week? How would you?
If it was me, I would say you would know where they are, right? So if you've had already a meeting with them, or let's just take, for example, you've had no engagement whatsoever. You know, they've contacted you just over the phone and whatnot, and you've sent something over to them.
Ballpark, for example, which sometimes I do.
Yeah. So, I mean, my gut feeling, if you're sending like a 200-300 grand quote, it's not going to be the first one, right? But let's just take, for example, it is the first one. I would probably say, give them until the following week, early the following week, you know, and say to them, look, you know, can you come back to me by, you know, early next week, or I'll give you a call. You see what I mean, right? You've always got to remember, the reality is most of your competitors are going to be the ones that send it, and they'll probably wait 2-3 weeks, if that, to follow it up. And most of them won't even follow it up at all.
Yeah, so true. Just like adding on that, I think there's a certain art to it, isn't there? Because you've got like a pest and then you've got a professional pest, if that makes sense. And there's something, you might have heard of it, KP, called the 80-20 rule. There's so many different abbreviations for it. But I think it's 80% of sales are made after the 4th to 6th point of contact, but only 20% of salespeople ever make more than 2 calls. So when you break it down like that, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's really interesting and important. You know what it is that sales has always been looked upon like the horrible, ugly part of a business, right? But the reality is, doesn't matter what you're doing, you know, sales is integral. And even these days, if you're a hospital, if you're a school, if you're, you know, you're still selling yourself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You're still selling yourself. So it's, even if you look at it now, very few places will have sales on business cards. So you want to have a sales manager or something like that, you'll have, do you know what I mean?
Solutions,
customer service.
You know.
Like a jazzy word for sales,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely, you know.
You don't like, no one likes the words, like salesperson or sales.
Because people don't want to be sold to, right?
Nobody wants to be sold to. That's
some people like being sold to. Like
it's almost a dirty word.
A salesman likes being sold to.
I'm the worst person.
That's funny. We literally just said that before you arrived. We were talking about it with James, who's helped us launch the podcast, and we said exactly that. Like we said, we are so easy to get sold to. We were talking about he sold to us at the EMC conference earlier in the year, or towards the end of last year. We all just said, like, if someone's better at something than us, or there's a product that's better than what we've currently got, like, we're sold. Like,
we're
take
buying.
our money, like, we're buying.
We're on the training.
I'll tell you what it is. I'm a really fucking hard person to sell to. But that's because I love sales, right? I really love it. So I want to see what you've got.
Sweat.
I want to see. I'll give you a little story, right? So last year, these 2 guys came to my door, and they were selling car cleaning stuff, right? So actually, they'll come and clean your car, right? Now, they came to my door, knocked on my door, and said, "Look, you know, you've got this nice car in the driveway. You know, what we'd like to do is valet your car, right?" And I said, "Okay, I'm interested. You have my attention now. Let's go. What are you talking, right?" And they said, "Okay, well, they said we'll do this, 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 we'll do this." And I was like, "Okay." I said, "Guys, you know, what are we looking at cost-wise?" And I think they said, I think it was like £85 or something like that.
That's extortionate.
It is extortionate. It's extortionate, right? So my first question to them was, okay, can you justify the £85? Now, I'll tell you why I'm going to ask you that question, because I can take it down the road and get it cleaned for £20, £25. So now you're putting that extortionate markup. Sell me that. Tell me why.
I'm going next door. I don't know.
And it was, I probably stood there for maybe half an hour trying to get them to sell it to me. I'm like, you know, I will do it if you can sell it to me. If you can justify why some, because look, you know, I'm here trying to help you, because you're going to leave my house. You're going to go every door right down the road and pitch the same thing. Everyone's going to be thinking the same thing.
Pitch. You're going to improve.
Needless to say, I didn't buy from them. But I hope some of my words.
You gave them like your time, and
I hope some of it sank in, because it was like, and that's the thing. You've got to know what you're bringing to the table. Right? Yeah. If you're going to charge, if your competitor charging X and you're charging 4 times that.
Why?
You've got to know why you're charging that. Do you know what I mean? It's super
It's
important.
like a Jordan Belfort and the Penn situation.
Yeah.
That's what you basically done.
What car have you got?
Well, actually, I don't have a car. You know, it's my wife's Audi. Yeah. It's my wife's.
It's what a nice car, like £85, definitely.
Yeah, that's probably why they marked it up.
It's my.
If it was a Nissan Micro, it'd have been £5.
They wouldn't have knocked on the door.
It's my wife's car, and the thing is that, you know, it's. I haven't had a car for such a long time, and I had a private plate on my old car, and every year, and this is they've changed the law now. But every year, if your plate wasn't on a car, you had to pay. I think it was like £25, £35 every year just to put it on retention for 12 months, right? And now it's like you can put it on retention for like 10 years. That's what I did. I put it on retention for like 10 years. And I was like, am I ever going to put that plate on a car now?
So have you still got that plate?
I still got the plate.
You still own the rights to that plate?
Yeah.
You're paying for the plate. Yeah. It's sitting.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So, but...
Might want some money in a few years.
I did actually think to myself, should I just sell it?
How much did you pay for the plate?
To be fair, it wasn't expensive. It was about 250 quid. but because now it's changed so much, you know, obviously the less letters you have,
that's
the more expensive it is. And mine was like, I think five letters. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I was thinking about.
So that's a good investment, actually. You know.
Yeah, you know, it
can
is.
be.
People buy and sell plates, though.
Yeah, all the time.
People do,
I follow someone on Instagram. They sell loads of private ones. Make a
Yeah.
fortune.
Yeah. There was one of our patron members.
Can you explain for the listeners what a patron member is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Please?
So when we launched the club in 2020, we basically we asked a few entrepreneurs, founders who are at the absolute pinnacle of their game to sit on the board as patron members of the club. So these are people who are hugely successful. They are giants in their industries, and the idea was for them to strategically help us grow the club, but also give talks to the members, some mentorship if it's needed, and just position themselves obviously as pillars of what we do.
How many? Sorry to interrupt. How many of those do you have currently on?
So we've now got about 6. You know, and it's just ad hoc. You know, we don't have a specific target to say, okay, we're going to have these many patron members or these many, you know, or this is obviously what they need to do. It's just as and when we need, and actually we feel that actually they can bring something to the table, something strong. You know.
Can you give an example of one or two of the patron members?
Yeah, absolutely. So Chef Atul Kocher.
Yeah, I've been to the dinner. I went to dinner. Unreal.
Yeah, so
Unreal.
he's
you recognise him from like MasterChef. Is he on MasterChef?
So he was on. I mean, he's a celebrity chef. He's on Saturday morning. Is it Saturday Morning Kitchen?
Saturday Morning Kitchen.
Saturday Morning Kitchen all the time. He's the first Indian chef to receive a Michelin star. First Indian chef in the world.
Oh wow!
To receive a Michelin star.
Wow.
He's got about 9.
You'd recognise him, definitely.
Where's his restaurants all based?
So,
are they the same? Are they a chain or?
No, so he's got one in his flagship one is in Mayfair, Kanishka. He's got one in Heathrow Airport, Kanishka Kitchen, and then he's got a few obviously dotted around London.
What's the one that we went to?
The one that we went to was called Matharu.
That's it.
But that's now changed because he parted ways with his business partner.
Okay,
so
fine,
obviously
fine.
she took obviously some of them. He took obviously some of them. You know. But so Atul is one of our patron members. Derek Redmond, who's ex-Olympian, he's one of our patron members.
He came to the event actually. I remember seeing him there. He was at the end of year party, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah. Derek was there. You know, Nick Feeney has now become a patron member.
What's he do?
So Nick is a coach, and he specialises in actually helping guide men, especially. I mean, you know, without sounding patronising, you guys seem a bit younger, but men who are 40 plus, like old gits like me, basically. You know, and it's called the Midlife Reset.
I see you doing a talk recently with him.
And it's really, really interesting, And so my brother Sonny and I, obviously, we've been on his program. He does this 3-month-long program called the Midlife Reset, and it's very much about exploring kind of self-evaluation about yourself and the world around you. So kind of looking at your partners, your kids, your friends, you know, your world. Why do you make decisions like that you do make, and all these kind of things. So the idea is basically to look at yourself essentially in a very different way before you ever hit crisis point.
Got you.
You know, and it's a big thing. Obviously, a lot of men, you know, obviously commit suicide. We all know
it's
that,
huge.
right?
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? So even though it says midlife, it doesn't have to be midlife. Do you know what I mean? It's about men, you know, becoming accustomed to what life is like and what it should be. Do you know what I mean? So it's so there's a few patron members.
That's huge.
That sounds really good.
How did that help you, that particular, doing the 3 month?
You know, it's. I mean, you have to be ready for it. You have to really be ready for it. You have to really be kind of, okay, I'm open to kind of change. And I'll tell you one of the first things which you did. Sonny and I, we went out for dinner last night with someone, and we were explaining the same thing. The first tasks he sets you is this is this kind of wheel on a paper, and it's split into, so it looks like a pizza, right? And you've got, you know, certain things in your life, right? So you've got, let's say, your relationship with your wife, relationship with your family and friends, you'll have spirituality, your health, money, you know, and basically it's got 1 to 10, right? So you basically shade in where you feel that you are. So spirituality, you may say, okay, well, I feel like I'm maybe 2 or 3, you know, social, I'm maybe 7, you know, and then when you, it's just, once you've done that and you step back from it, and then you look at it and you think, shit, like, you know, I'm not hitting at 8 or 9 on anything. So basically, you're looking at it and you'll say, because look, you're never going to be a 10, because there's always room for improvement. But you can look at it and say, if you're at about a 4 or 5 on everything, you're looking at it and saying that nothing is working at its optimum level. Do you know what I mean? And nothing can be 8 or 9. Not everything can be 8 or 9, because you've only got finite time as well. So then you pick 4 or 5 different things and say, you know what, this year I need to work on this. Yeah, I want to focus on this. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's money or health or family or relationships, whatever it may be. You know. So really, that was kind of an eye opener for sure.
Going back to the Patreon members.
Yeah.
So obviously you're king networker. Like, so obviously with the Patreon members, you know, these are established people. These are people that, you know, you can't just DM or you can't just message or. So how do you get in contact with these people? Or how, from your past, are you in contact with these people?
You know, I've been doing what I've been doing, not obviously with the club naturally, but previous to the club when we had the magazine, you know, I've been doing it for about 10, 12 years. So over the last decade, I've built up a lovely pool of people.
Yeah.
You know, and built up really good relationships with people. The reality is, look, you know, the reason I built up really strong relationships is because I've never really asked people for anything, unless it's something that actually there is value in the business or something. And you know, but usually I don't go into any situation just saying, right, what can I get from this person?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Except knowledge. So that's what it is. And actually, over the years, I've had the privilege of sitting down and having lunches and dinners and conversations with people who have owned cornerstones to countries, right? And, you know, they are formidable business people. And just learning from them. The
most valuable thing, really.
Touching on some of your guests as well, like some of them have amazed me in terms of, I know you had the founder of Shazam, and you also had, am I right in saying you had somebody who owned the largest McDonald's franchise in Europe? With how many McDonald's did that guy have? Like 140?
No. It was about 40, 45, 46 when he sold it, which made him the biggest McDonald's franchisee in Europe. And then, you know, he'd run the course and he said it was time to sell, you know, but...
He sold and he's doing
He's sold and he's invested back into
franchises. Again, isn't he?
So I was actually walking, while I was walking to the studio here, I walked past German Donald.
It's across the road, isn't it?
Yeah. Because I've never been in there, right? And I know that he's invested into a whole bunch of those. He's become a big investor in that chain, but he's also invested into Itsu and a few, you know, different chains.
Ben and Jerry's, I think he's done as well.
Ben and Jerry's, and
really? So he's come out of McDonald's, taking his knowledge.
So these types of people, all through, like you, I know you said you've been doing what you've been doing for a decade. I think it's a good time to discuss what, you know, the magazines and what you was doing before the founders, but even in a 10-year span, to know have all of these contacts. That's you know. These highly successful at the top of the kind of chain, really, when it comes to business and entrepreneurship. Like, what the magazines really is probably a good place to start. What you was doing before 10 years ago, where did you start when you?
You know, so my degree is in marketing. My passion is in design, so I always wanted to do something creative. I started my publishing career, so I worked in publishing. I worked for a big publishing company. I worked in their oil and gas division,
Yeah.
Right? Not the most sexiest thing in the world, but you know, it's an industry.
It sounds quite cool though, to be honest. Like oil and gas.
Oil and gas.
Like,
you know,
when you hear oil and gas, you just think.
Yeah, and it was.
That was working for a big firm.
That was working for a big firm. And then about 12, 13 years ago, I left there and I set up my own oil and gas magazine.
Okay.
You know, we were making money from issue one, day one, right?
Via sponsorships and people advertising.
Yeah, advertising. That was always the, you know, for any magazine on the planet, that was always the model, right? It was always an advertising-driven product. You know, very, very few would have a subscription-based revenue model, and that's it. Most magazines
advertising.
It was advertising.
What switched in your head where you were like, I'm going to become a business owner? Have you always been entrepreneurial when you was going through education and things like that?
Oh my God! Listen, I would sell sweets and chocolates in the playground.
Every entrepreneur
has sold something in the
100%.
playground. I don't care who you are. If you're an entrepreneur, you've sold something on the playground.
100%.
That's where it starts, right? That's like the first hustle.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
You know? So, and I think that is, you know, actually, I'll tell you where it starts. Being a paper boy.
Yes. Trust me.
I posted something over COVID and with one of my nephews who lives down the road, and he was doing this paper round. So in the mornings when we were all in lockdown, I'd go for a walk, you know, when we could, and I saw him with his paper bag, you know, and I took a picture and I posted it on social media, and I was like, this is where it all begins.
Yeah,
because
that's it.
When you know, I'm a Have you got? I don't know if you guys done paper rounds.
Yeah,
I got like 10.
I quit mine straight away.
But you did it, right?
I don't mind.
I could never land a paper round. There was one place I grew up in Selsdon, South Croydon,
right.
that done a paper round, and this guy, he lived on my road. He just had it on Smash. And he done it for the whole time I've wanted a paper round. I just couldn't get into it.
Really?
So I'm like one of the few people, I think, who's just never had a paper round.
Listen to Luke's story.
Yeah. I've got a couple of stories about being a paperboy. I remember I always wanted one. You had to be 13 years old. And I was asking from the age of 10, please give me a paper round, please give me a paper round. As soon as I got 13, I don't even care about my presents. I'm just down for that paper round, you know. I got into the shop. So I got quite a few, and then I ended up just getting asking, I was like, how can I make more money from this situation? So I started going to shops and asking them if I can deliver their leaflets as well. So then I got a few different shops. And then suddenly I was getting people on our inset days and the weekends. I was getting my mum's droppers all in Oxted, for example, and we'd all just deliver leaflets. And then that way I was kind of making money from delivering the leaflets. And then about 4 times that amount. And my friends, I'm paying them £25, buying them a Lucozade each. They're all happy with that. And then
employees
it was
crazy.
Then that was one of those things. Yeah, but everyone, paper rounds, selling sweets, selling Lucozades at school.
I think that's where it all starts for a lot of us. You know, if you've got that mindset, it starts from the playground. It starts from when you're young. You know, I did a podcast recently, and she asked me, you know, do you think entrepreneurs can you teach entrepreneurship, or are people born with that natural skill, right? And I actually,
it's quite a tough question.
Yeah, you know what? I did say to her, you know, I believe that, you know, poverty breeds opportunistic characteristics, right? So when you are born into a family and you know you don't have much, and I didn't, right? So my mum and dad split up when we were very young. I was 8, my brother was 4. You know, we grew up in a 2-bedroom council house. You know, and like all of us, right? We'd go to school and we'd see that kid who's got the best trainers, or do you know what I mean? He's mum and dad picking him up in the newest car, or do you know what I mean? And so I think, you know, we all go through that process, and because of not having that, you become, there's that desire of want. I want that. Do you know what I mean? I think that's where it all stems from a very young age. And then as you get older, you start thinking differently. And this kind of goes back to the club, right? So our social impact is to encourage more kids to become entrepreneurs or think like entrepreneurs. If you want to go through education and you want to come out and work in a bank or work in a hospital, and that's okay. But as soon as you walk through the threshold, think like an entrepreneur. Do you know what I mean? So you can work for someone, but think like an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So obviously had that mindset while she was working for the magazine? How long did you work for them before you took the leap and started your own?
It was probably it was only, to be fair, it was only about 2 or 3 years.
Oh, right.
2 or 3 years, but I learned a lot.
Got in there and learned. And
I realised what it was that was making the money. I left and I set up my own magazine.
Nice.
Within a couple of years, I was very conscious that I'd put all my eggs in one basket in this oil and gas magazine. And then at the start of every year, because, I had a keen interest in business, and every magazine title I was coming across, I'd subscribed to a whole load of magazines at the start of the year. Everything that I was coming across was very American, right? So Fortune, Forbes, Entrepreneur, Inc., all American titles. Great, but there was this transatlantic disconnect. So I said to the team, and we had a very small team at the time, and I said, look, if we can't find what we're looking for, let's create it. We ended up with creating a business magazine which was targeted to the British Asian demographic. That was our niche. Yeah. And it was called Asian Wealth. And it wasn't about wealth in a monetary sense. It was wealth in the sense of wealth of entrepreneurship, wealth of enterprise, wealth of knowledge.
And similar to what obviously we're preaching, really.
Before the days of podcasting, you was doing it.
Absolutely.
That's the old school podcast.
That's it.
So what was the sort of the numbers looking? How much? What was the scaling look like? Size of the team, size of the prints you were doing.
So at the height of it, we probably at the height of it, we had 2 magazines. We had the Oil and Gas magazine. We had Asian Wealth, and there was probably around 24 people in the team across both publications. So it's quite a big team.
Pretty decent size,
quite a big team. And then what I did is that I sold the Oil and Gas magazine to a very good friend of mine. So he now runs it, and he's taken it to a complete different height. And this was a big lesson that I learned from somebody else, that know your limits. Know your limits, because look, everyone says, sky's the limit and whatnot. It's not. Because the thing is that if you are just focusing on one thing only, you can say, right, you can take that wherever you want. But there is, at some point, you have to realize, this is where I'm going to take it, and this is my capability, and that's okay. Yeah. One of our patron members, he exited his business for 260 million. Right?
Wow.
But for him, he knew that was his
limit. Yeah.
He sold the company for 260 mil. He retained a small share, right, of the business, and he said, I knew who I was selling it to, they're going to take it somewhere else. And now that company's become £1 billion company, right?
What company is that?
Okay, can you say it?
Yeah. So it's Mayank Patel, founder of Currencies Direct. So he's like an older brother to Sonny and I.
Yeah.
So he's actually a patron member of our club, and he sold it. He's the one who sold it. So he sold it to a huge business, huge company, global company, who then took it to where it needed to go. And he openly says, "Look, I don't think I would have been able to take it to
that's fair enough.
It's important
to take it to £1 billion level, right? Because I knew what I knew, and my contacts were this, and we had the pushing power to take it here.
Yeah,
they are the ones who were able to take it to here.
Yeah,
but knowing that limitation is really important.
Was that similar with your magazine? So did you have an end goal when you started to eventually sell, or did it get to a stage where
did you have an exit
you wanted
strategy
to exit?
No. I didn't have an exit strategy, to be fair. I started losing passion.
How far in did you start to lose the love for it? How many years?
I think it was probably maybe about 4 or 5 years in. So 4 or 5 years, we had a good run. And I'll tell you what it was. So it was, we had, Asian Wealth had started doing really well. And it was a lot more sexier. We were working with luxury brands and premium brands. And we were going to the Maldives. And with the Oil and Gas magazine, not so much, not as sexy, right? So I was like, and I think, again, knowing what I had learnt was when you start losing attention on something, you know, you have to move fast. You've got to move fast, because otherwise, a lot of people, once they start losing interest in something, they'll sit on it. They'll sit on it and sit on it and sit on it until there's no value left in it. Do you know what I mean? So even if you want to sell it, you're going to struggle, or you'll get a very, very small amount of what you could have got if you sold it when you immediately. Do you know what I mean?
Passionate about it still.
Yeah,
you're still
100%.
driving it forward. And it's like, I'm about to drop off, which means the value of it's going to drop, I suppose. And then you've done the right thing.
Although you lost passion, did you still find it hard to sell? Because like the way I'm trying to see it is, my business is my baby, but I know one day me and Luke always have an end goal to eventually sell. Did you find it hard to detach yourself and move on, because that was like your first venture? Or
we were just talking about this before we started, Sam, and you know, it's I still have that problem of, you know, not being able to detach. But when you mentally think, okay, you know what, I've lost interest in it, or I'm losing interest in it, it becomes a lot more easier to detach, right? And I think that's what it was. It's a very hard, because look, when you start your own business, it's your business, it's your baby, and it's very hard. It's very hard to detach, because we're human at the end of the day, right? We're going to become attached to that. But you have to remember that the business has to be bigger than any other entity. You know, so when we started the club, the first 50 members were people that I knew, and they are still members today. They are founding members, right? And but now it's got to the stage, people, you know, like you guys joined the club not because you knew me, but because of what you saw at the end of year party, or because you know Frank, or you know, and that's where it should be. That's where the business should be. It should be bigger than the entity.
Yeah, you didn't even need to sell it.
Yeah.
I was selling it. Obviously, they
Frank
were just
was my sales guy. You know,
yeah.
it was like
Head of sales.
to be fair, Jake didn't really need to sell me or Luke or Joe. I don't think. We went to the end of year party and I was like, wow, this is actually sick. Like everyone was so friendly. Yeah. People come up and say hi.
And the amount of people in the room as well. Like,
yeah,
would never brush shoulders with them.
I met so many millionaires, and I don't think I've ever been in a room with that many successful people. So I was just automatically, I was sucked in. Yeah. And the next day I messaged Jake, I was like, bro, how do I sign up? And I think we signed up a couple of weeks after, didn't we? Me,
it's
Joe and Jake signed up at the same
time. It is like
time.
That's what you bring.
It is. You know, and I love hearing that, and I'm glad you guys, you know, have become part of the family as well. And it's nice to hear that, you know. And just touching on what you just said, you know, it was, everyone was friendly, because we've got one rule in the club, right, which is zero egos. You know, there are...
Which is probably, like, sorry to interrupt, but that's the hardest thing probably to control when you've got a room
full of millionaires.
There is no ego in the room.
I'll tell you what it is, because I always... And we've got members who are turning over £100 million businesses. We've got members in the club like that. But... I also say to them, and I say to everyone, look, if you think you're big, there's always a bigger fish in the pond. Do you know what I mean? And I think, you know, equally, look, there's a couple of guys that Sonny and I also lean on for advice, right? And one of the guys, there's two brothers. One of them, Sonny and I are very close to, and their net worth is 1.2, 1.3 billion. But what happens when you're at that level? You're not interested in money. You're not interested, because with the greatest level of respect, it becomes irrelevant. Yeah. You know, because at 20, 30, 40 million pounds, there's still shit you can't afford. Do you know what I mean? But when you are playing the game at 800 million, 900 billion, you know, there's very few things in life you cannot afford. So what happens then is, psychologically, you become less interested in, you know, money. You become more interested in humanity, in philanthropy, in people, in fulfillment. Do you know what I mean?
See, like you were talking about earlier with that circle. Yeah. I suppose the money thing would probably be at, was it a 10 probably, if they got the money thing, and then obviously everything else would then obviously be moving up, because they completed that part of the circle.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just like going back to that. So if somebody put 10 on there, But the reality is that you look at the other parts, and then, but that money thing would then become irrelevant to that person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could even be a zero because it's irrelevant.
I'll tell you what I have learned sitting with some of these people over the years. I've learned some really, really interesting things about how people perceive money, how people perceive wealthy people, how people perceive the process. You know, one of my friends was saying to me, you know, you have to let people go through that process. Do you know what I mean? One of the guys that I know, he's a big Patek Philippe collector, or he was, right? And he was saying, look, when I was growing, for me, it was like the epitome of success and knowing that actually I had a beautiful collection of Patek Philippe watches.
Like you, Sam.
And
One day.
Yeah.
He loves his watches.
Yeah, I don't have a Patek, just to let everyone know.
Yes.
Yes, I will soon.
Yeah. So he was like, look, you know what it was? Is that for me, that was actually the definition of success, of just having a beautiful collection of watches. And he said, I got to a stage in my life where I was able to, you know, accumulate this lovely collection of watches. He goes, they were sitting in a safe in Geneva. And he said, it was only after a couple of years I realized that actually what was the value to that? Do you know what I mean? I'd spent all this money and I had this lovely collection of watches, now they're sitting in a safe.
Not even wearing them.
Yeah, not even wearing them. Do you know what I mean? And he goes, but I had to go through that cycle, because if you had told me when I had one Patek Philippe, if you had told me, listen, bro, you're not going to need a whole collection, I would have said, no, I need it. I need it.
Also, that's what kind of drives you anyway.
That's what drives me. Yeah.
Certain things drive you, and it's until you kind of get there and make it that you can look back and reflect and say, oh, I didn't need this, but then maybe you wouldn't have had the same drive or the ambitions.
Yeah, what you said earlier, KP, about when you don't grow up with much, you feel like you want that. I never had money for a Rolex, but the minute I could afford one, I bought one.
Yeah.
And I don't even really wear it because I don't want to get robbed in London, because you hear about it all the time. People are getting their arms chopped off.
It's
And
got worse and worse.
yeah, maybe when we go to Dubai, we might be able to flex the watches. Are you into your watches? I see you got a nice Hublot one.
Yeah. You know what? I do like my timepieces. I'm not an expert by any stretch. You know, I've got some friends who are real kind of watch fanatics. Really, really lovely guys as well. But yeah, for me, it's got to be a story. It's got to be a story behind it. You buy into the story. You buy into, you know. But even like one of my friends recently, all he walks around with. He's got a lovely collection, but he walks around with his Apple Watch. And he says to me all the time. He says, you know, because my Richard Mille or you know whatever watch. He goes, it doesn't count my steps. It doesn't monitor my heart rate. Do you know what I mean? So you can buy these really expensive watches.
That's true.
But it goes, the Apple Watch will monitor my heart rate. It will tell me how many steps I've done. Do you know what I mean? It's like
it's practical.
Yeah. And it was like, so actually when he goes around, he's wearing this Apple Watch, which is, do you know what I mean?
So talking about like what drives us. So what drives you? What's the one thing that you think that? Obviously, like you just said, your friend, it was the Patek collection.
Yeah.
So is there something in your mind that drives you?
You know, I think there is now, and I'm a big believer in actually this drive changes as you go through.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we've experienced it now, even though we're really young. We're still experiencing it.
Yeah, it will change. It will change because your reasons for drive change, right? So right now, I've got obviously 2 daughters, and obviously, you know, for me, it's creating a nice nest egg for them to do something, but not to do nothing.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? It's really important, and it's hard. It's hard because you know when I grew up, like I said, you know, I grew up without much at all, but kids these days are growing up in 4 or 5 bedroom houses with 2 cars in the driveway, thinking that's normal life, and it is normal life for them. It is normal life for them. Right? You know, I take my kids to the fucking Maldives every year, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
It's normal for them.
Yeah, it's normal for them.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah, go.
Sorry to cut you off. So you grew up obviously with that drive to do more because you didn't have the resources you've worked so hard for and you have now.
Yeah.
How do you bring kids up when you've done well to try and make them understand the values of life and hunger and work drive? How do you do that?
Yeah.
It's you have to sometimes make hard decisions. So my wife and I, we deliberately made the decision not to put our kids into private school. Right, and I'll share a story with you. Right, so I've been telling my 16-year-old daughter for years. Listen, if you want to do something in life, you've got to put in, sweat, blood, and tears. You've got to put in the legwork. You've got to put in hard work. And this is where I grew up, and this is what I went through. And for her, it's just stories. It doesn't really mean much. Do you know what I mean? And then what happened was she was at school one day, and she sat next to her best friend at lunchtime, and her friend didn't have food to eat, right? Because she couldn't afford to buy lunch that day. So, and actually, the way I found out, so I put money into my daughter's it's called Parent Pay, right?
Do they still have the thumbprint thing?
I don't even know, to be fair. I think so. Yeah, and I put money into her account so she could buy lunch and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then there must have been about £100 sitting in that account for her. And then she was taking packed lunches, right? So, but then I knew she was taking packed lunches, but then that money went down to like 40 quid. So I said to her, if you're taking packed lunches,
You're eating too much.
my first question was, how much are you eating? you're taking packed lunch. But there was £100 and then now it's 40 quid. Where's that money gone, right? And she said, oh, well, you know what, I bought lunch for this person, and I bought lunch for that person, and I bought lunch for that person, and I bought lunch for this person a few times and whatnot. So I said, okay, look, I said, tell me about it. And she said, look, you know what, this person didn't have any money for lunch, or they didn't have any food and whatnot. And I said to her, listen, and for me, that was actually a really good experience for her. I wanted her to go through that experience, because no matter how much I've said to her, now all of a sudden when you're sitting for lunch and your best friend next to you can't afford to buy lunch, shit just got real.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You are now in that situation.
Yeah.
And I've told you for years that this is how I grew up. It meant nothing to you. But now you are in that situation.
You're experiencing it.
Friend.
Did that open up her mind to that way of life?
100%. It did, because all of a sudden she realised that, I am privileged. Actually, I'm privileged in the sense of I have a meal in front of me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Right? So she realised, and actually my advice to her was, look, if somebody asks you to buy them lunch, don't ask any questions, buy them lunch, right? If they ask for lunch the second time, buy it for them. If they ask for lunch the third time, now you've got to make a decision. Are they taking advantage of your generosity, or do they honestly need it? Right? You've got to make that decision. Do you see what I mean? So it's that fine balance between understanding when people are trying to take advantage, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously, or people who actually need help. Do you know what I mean? So going back to your question, it is hard, but I'm always conscious. I'm not a big fan of cheese, right? But at Christmas, we get a nice cheese ball, right? And previously the girls would, while we're walking through the supermarket at the aisle, and they'll just grab the only cheese that I really like is Camembert, right? And,
I love a bit of Camembert.
And Camembert, right, can start from a few quid all the way up to really expensive one, right?
Are you in Waitrose here, or
really
are you
expensive.
in Tesco as well?
I think it was Sainsbury's, to be fair.
Yeah, that's still
it was, and the girls would just pick one up and then just chuck it in the tray.
And
I'm like, how much is that? I don't know. I said, never pick something out without looking at the price. So it's all these little things as I'm just going through life.
Is that not paying? That's why, isn't it?
Yeah. But now it's got to the stage where, I make sure that girls pay for certain things. Do you know what I mean? They pay their own. Do you know what I mean? And it's not easy. It's not easy. And I have this conversation with some of my other friends who who are super wealthy. So they fly
That's
private, and they live, you know, every holidays there. They have a place in Dubai, so they're there, and do you know what I mean? And actually, so when I speak to them, they're saying, I'm really worried that my kids are going to grow up in this bubble and they don't know what real life is, and do you know what I mean? So it's a hard one.
It must be hard because I don't have kids, but when I do, I want to make sure they have a life where they're comfortable and they're nice and they're good, as I'm sure you are as well. I want them taken to nice places, but it's like, how do you still make sure they have that grounding with reality? Because I don't think any of us in this room really come from money as such. Like, you know, I never went without, but
No, I never went without.
you know, I didn't have like
to have that. That's, you know.
yeah, for sure. But we didn't have like, you know, the private schools or like 5 pairs of trainers.
No.
When I used to get new trainers when I was a kid.
Well, like
I
you
used to
say,
get
that's
gas.
what breeds the entrepreneurship as
that's,
well.
That's what it does.
That's
It breeds that hunger.
That's what's in there.
And I think that's the biggest fear, is that kids in this next generation are growing up without that hunger.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I think that's
But then you also get, if you look at Eddie Hearn, like his old man was minted, right?
Yeah.
And I think Eddie Hearn became even more successful than his old man, like in spite of his dad. It can go the opposite way as well.
He said multiple times, there's a few people like that where he said, I think his dad's called Barry or something.
That's it, Barry Hearn.
He said, like, I grew up I was always the posh, well, he weren't posh, but like, you know, that's Barry's boy, and I think he went private school. And
That was his name, Barry's son.
Yeah,
probably.
Barry's son or something. And so he grew up just kind of wanting to prove a point, make something of himself, get his own name, and that's what drove him. So yeah, I think it's always, one way or another, there's always something that drives people, like more so, a lot of people have been, you know, had nothing, or they've
Had too much.
Yeah, they've had too much. There's always, it can go one of two ways, can't it? All of this stuff.
KP, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for
so
it.
Capital 36.
Yep.
You told me a good story about that
Yep.
before. So where does the name come from?
Okay, so we've got two main businesses, Capital 36, Media 36.
Yeah.
36 stems from the house number of where we grew up, in Norbury, South London. So 36. So even now,
And that's you and your
and
brother,
my brother
right?
Sonny.
Yeah.
So what are the two companies for the listeners?
Yeah, so we
What
have
do they do?
Media 36. The Founders Club is under Media 36,
Yeah.
and that used to be our media company. Essentially, that's why it's called Media 36. That's where the magazine and everything was from. Capital 36 is the property arm of our business, which Sonny looks after. So Sonny is, like I said, he's not only my brother, but he's my business partner. His background has always been in property. You know, we're mainly involved with development, residential only. You know, we every now and then dip our toe into private equity, but mainly it's just focused on property investment.
Yeah. What sort of level, what scale, how do you do it?
So, you know, essentially we look at developments which are, you know, ranging from $1 million, you know, all the way up through to maybe about 20 million. Mm-hmm. So the deal sizes that we usually get involved with are, I mean, the sweet spot is around £5-6 million.
Yeah.
That's usually the
So like the bigger percentage, kind of. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And my, you know, start of this year, I changed my role in the business. So now 2 days a week I work with Sonny on Capital 36. 3 days a week I work with Rucci, who's MD for
Legend.
The legend, the boss.
Proper
you know?
legend,
yeah. So either which way I turn, I've got to report to someone now, right? So it's either I report to Sonny or I report to Rucci. So yeah. So there's always someone keeping me in line.
In theory, you probably needed a boss though, right?
I've
So
always
sometimes
did.
when you're the boss, you need a boss.
I've always needed someone to keep me in line because it's I'm a troublemaker, man.
What's the day to day in both sides of the business when you go in? What are your roles? What are you doing? You're looking to achieve each day. Like
I'll tell you every week, and you know what? It's not even the day, right? Because look, again, we'll all have kind of good days, bad days, right? But we have a rule in the team collectively. We say every week you've got to move the needle. You've got to have done a few things that move the needle, right? So, and that always stems from goals, right? So at the start of the year, we'll set out goals to say, right, what are the professional goals, what are personal goals for the whole year. Then you break that down into quarters, and you know, right, okay, by March, end of March, this is what we need to have achieved, and then obviously the next quarter. So, you know, there's always, every week we have kind of our set goals, and we say, right, okay, and we actually help each other, right? When I say help each other, it's not just me, Sonny, and Rucci, you know, but there's Krish, there's Gemini, there's Carlo, there's Leica, there's loads of people obviously in the team.
Network.
That we help each other to say, right, okay, you know, what are you trying to achieve? Where can, you know, if you're struggling with something, lean on us.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So, yeah, but it all starts with that goal. Yeah.
And for you, are you where you're at currently with the Business and Founders Club specifically? Are you still heavily on kind of a growth phase? Are you trying to just make improvement to what you've got now? Are you
a bit of both?
Are you just operating?
No, a bit of both. You know, I think the way that we are and the way that we think, and I think even the ethos of the club, right? That, you know, we will never just be operating.
No.
I'm always like, I mean, I get in a lot of trouble because I'm constantly changing shit. I'm like,
who you getting in trouble with? Rucci
all the time. I mean, Rucci's always she kind of borderline bullies me as well. But no, she's lovely. She's lovely, and it's you know, it's only because I'm a very creative person. So, you know, the problem with creative people is that if they look at something for too long, they start changing their mind.
Do you know what this guy done to me the other day? So I got my WhatsApp. I've got the Dialify logo is the little hummingbird. You've seen it?
Yeah.
I thought it was perfect, like bang in the centre. He was like, "Can you pass me a phone, please?" Didn't mention it to me. For like, he'd seen it about 2 weeks ago. Probably had sleepless nights about it. He moved the logo. I'm not lying, about 1 millimeter, and then came back to me and said, "Yeah, it's fine now."
I told him, he had a picture of himself.
No, I had a picture of the logo, but the full logo.
No. Before you change the
before
logo,
that, yeah.
There's a picture of yourself, right? And I said, actually, look, why don't you switch it to the logo? And, and then he switched it to the logo, but it was just off center. And you know, this is my OCD coming out, right? And it's like I would look at it.
You wouldn't get some difference, honestly.
Yeah, I was like, you know, and I, rather than going back to him and saying, listen, Frank, listen, change it. It needs to come down a little bit. Increase the size of the logo. Move it slightly to the left, a little bit down. I just
pixels down.
I just thought to myself, you know what? When I see him next time, I'm just going to take it to him and I'm going to do it. So obviously, when we were in the cabin Saturday, that was a prime opportunity for me to do. But that's my OCD. So, you know, and that kind of goes back to what Sam, you were saying is about detaching. I've had to learn to detach myself from certain things. You know, and say, okay, you know, it's okay to do that. You know, it's probably not the way that I would have done it, but you can't do everything in your business. I mean, you have to let other people take the lead in certain things. You know, so you know, you have to learn.
Giving the trust to the people you've obviously taken on to do a certain role.
Absolutely.
Yeah, obviously there's a fine line between some stuff you want to try and get the best out of your team, use your experience, your knowledge, your eye or whatever to say, yeah, let's just change this next time or improve in this area or whatever. And then at the same time, without every single thing they ever do being down, you know, their neck, breathing down their neck. You know,
I think it's really important as well, Joe. Right? Is that know your lane? And I've said that I've said it in loads of podcasts before. Right? Is that when you start your business, sometimes you're in a very difficult position because you have to wear all the hats. Right?
Yeah.
You are the operations person, you're the marketing person, you're the accounts person, you're the sales person, you're every person, right? But what happens is that you have to very quickly find your lane where you're good at, right? And you have to, if you try and be everything, you're only going to get to a certain point. You're only going to get to a certain level. You won't get higher than that. I guarantee you.
Yeah.
But if you find your lane, what you're good at, and excel into that, 100%, you know, you become a fucking superhero.
That's where we're
we're literally all at that stage at the moment. So we've been speaking about this quite a lot on the previous episode as well. So literally the last episode, I think these boys more so like some advice for, I think Sam was saying like he's very good at sales and he wants to get back more on the phone rather than managing people. But at the same time, I think from last year you had 3 of you and now you're up to like 10.
Yeah, we scaled from 3 to, well, it was 2 and now we're at 10. So we've scaled very quickly. Quite, not largely, but we've like 4x the size of the company, and it kind of comes with challenges when A, you're not used to managing, B, your time's taken away from what actually makes revenue, and C, you're just trying to learn different ways of managing different people. Because I find with managing people, I think I read in a book, every single person has an average of like 4 key emotions. If you've got 10 staff, that could be like 40 emotions in one day. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So you might have one of your salespeople having a bad day and they'll call you like, oh, Sam, this client's giving me stress. And then someone else is like, look, no one's answering the phone. And all this time, I'm still trying to generate revenue for the company from where everyone's still quite new. It's still not ready to be automated yet.
Yeah. I guess we're all at the size where, like, I've just taken someone on to help assist me with like some of the management and stuff, and we've got a social media manager full time for the podcast who's also helping with our businesses. He's been helping me quite a lot, launched the rebrand and stuff. We're all at that kind of in between stage where exactly that, we're not going to be able to take it loads further without this team of people around us. But I think maybe not so much myself. I'm really keen on, for my businesses, getting people in, but I think these guys are a little bit reluctant to, whether they're too early to be taking these people on, like you were saying, for each area, and exactly no right time. So I guess what would you say is the right, well, there is no right time, but at what kind of level of your business, or how do you know, right, I need to now invest the time, effort or money to take a team to build around me fully so I can focus exactly what I'm good at, or at managing these people?
I think that's a good question, and it's a very hard question to answer as well, right? Because when you're a small business and you're growing, and you realise, right, the thought process is you realise, okay, I can't do everything, and this is getting, I'm working up 25 hours a day now. I can't do it. So the first thought process that every entrepreneur will have is that I need to take someone on, but I can't afford them, or I can't afford them full time. And there's always an element of, okay, fine, there's freelancers, there's part time, there's
virtual assistants. We've talked about on a previous
virtual assistants. It's I've always moved in a way of, and I guess it comes down to sales, because I'm a salesperson, and I've always looked at, okay, who's going to be able to bring in money into the business? In order to, do you know what I mean? So I've always kind of looked at it in that sense. So rather than hiring an accounts person or hiring a marketing person, or whatever it may be, I've always kind of directed more towards a salesperson, because I know that if I put in X amount, they're going to be able to generate X amount, and from that, then I can then
it's a return on investment.
Yeah, so true. Just a question on that. I'd be really interested to get your thoughts on this. So, would you hire a salesperson full time who has a side hustle, or would you not? Or have you ever before?
Would I hire a salesperson full time who has a side hustle?
Yes,
I would. I would.
Hard one, isn't it?
No. I'll tell you what I'm thinking. Right. So I 100% I would, but naturally they will be on a 3-month probation. Right. If my rule is very simple. Right. If you work for me, I don't care what you do. Outside of that, if you can deliver beyond what I want you to deliver, you can do whatever you want. You can have 3 side hustles if you want. Do you know what I mean? Because what you're showing me that actually, that this is, but the fact is, I will never let you get to that point, because when you've shown me that you can go beyond my expectations and still have a side hustle, I'm going to take you with me. Do you see what I mean? So I will give you that opportunity, right? If you've been upfront and honest with me to say, you know what, actually, I want to do this, I want to work for you full time, but I've got a side hustle as well. Show me.
Looking for a job, Sam?
Show me. Yeah,
can I come work for you?
What's your side hustle? He's got free side hustle.
Another question around that is, so obviously, as you know, sales is a very performance-based industry, right? Are you cutthroat with your staff? And if so, when is enough in terms of, if they're not hitting targets, like, what are you looking for? How are you changing that? And how long do you give them?
It's a really, really good question, and I have been in that boat many a times. To be fair,
It's not a nice position.
no, it's not. It's not. I mean, look. To be fair, I've always been the good cop. My brother's always been the bad. But the thing is that because we've always been a small business, so I've always treated the team as like family. So when you come and work for us, you're part of the family.
You can really tell that.
Yeah, you're part of the. You
can tell that massively.
Yeah, you embed yourself within our family, right? So, and part of that family comes very transparent communication. So you know what your job is, right? We're not here, to spoon feed anyone. We'll hire intellectual people who understand their job and know how to do it. Right, say this is your job now. Whether it takes you 2 days to do that, or whether it takes you, 5 days to do that, that's on you. Do you see what I mean? That goes back to the side hustle that we were talking about, right? So, but the reality is, if you are not performing, naturally, look, of course, we'll have conversations along the way, right? So if you've got, there's always targets at the end of every month. There's target. If you haven't hit that target, we'll understand. And say, okay, Sam, why? Tell us what went wrong. Do you know what I mean? And keeping in mind, I'm a salesperson, and he's going through a salesperson as well. So if it's bullshit, we'll see right through it immediately, right? But also, we're also immersed in the business. So if we have generated not enough leads that month, and you're saying to me, I struggled this month because we didn't have enough leads, I know we didn't have enough leads. Do you see what I mean? So actually, I know. There is an element of, I wouldn't say cutthroat. I think, look, I've learned enough in my life to kind of know that that's not how you build a sustainable business. Do you know what I mean? Business has changed so much over the years. That day and age of like Steve Jobs kind of era of creating one pillar, holding up everything doesn't really exist in business anymore. It has to be very, very fluid. It has to be very, very different, and you have to be able to work very fluidly with obviously your team. Do you see what I mean? I'm not cutthroat. There are people who can be cutthroat, but I don't believe in that really.
I don't think it helps your culture, and I think what comes across with yourself and the members club, you obviously. I can already tell you're very big on building a culture. For me, that was always from day one. I said with like the building company, I said that's number one thing. The culture is everything for a business. Is what I believe. And I think that comes across quite clearly in your business.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're taking people, firing people, making an example of people and stuff like that, I just don't think it's. I think for me, I've very quickly, if someone comes in that doesn't fit the culture. Very quickly, you can A, tell, and B, you can see the effect it has on the other people within your business. Even if they are great guys, you know them, you can trust them and stuff. As soon as you put someone negative or that doesn't fit that culture, you can tell, and then you've just got to get rid. It doesn't need to be in a bad way. It's just this isn't working. Like you're going to affect my business, and you don't do it so now everyone else around you is scared to get fired or anything like that. I don't ever think that's a good
Sometimes you've got to fire your best performer. I've been in companies before where you got billers doing 50 grand a month, but they walk around like that shit don't stink. They're coming in late, they're going out for continuous fab breaks, or just whatever. Like, when people start back chatting to higher up levels, C-level hires. So I've seen top billers get fired just to set an example.
They don't fit the culture.
Culture is very, very important. So even in the club, even in our club, right? So culture, one of the things that the membership team also know that when they are on a Zoom with you or when they're speaking to you, it's a very kind of it's a mirrored effect, right? So what you may see is they are. So who brought you guys on? Was it
Jake? Oh, the guy who actually
head of sales. Head of sales. I was going to be paid for that actually.
Head of sales, but who was the one who?
I introduced them.
It was
Chris.
Chris.
Okay, Chris. So when you got, what did you have, a Zoom or something like that with Chris?
I had
didn't
an
get
intro
anything.
call. I think he pre-qualified me to make sure I wasn't a waste of time. As you do, we do the same with our prospects. Then we jumped on a Zoom and we were just talking for about an hour about Dubai, you know. I didn't think we spoke about the founders. I was just like, sign me up.
You called me. You just called me after I joined. I didn't get anything other than that. You called and introed yourself, I think.
Right, okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, a bit. I mean, usually, I'll tell you what it was. So, I know that you guys came through Frank, right? So, Frank, essentially, look, if Frank recommends someone, you know, and actually, not just Frank, if any member recommends someone, well, always, you know, usually the vetting process is a lot more slimmer, only because that person knows the club. Yeah. And they are recommending a person for a reason.
I've done it for a year before I recommended it to anybody. Not for any other reason. Like, I thought the whole thing was like serious.
Yeah.
I loved it.
The story.
But he just didn't understand. I just don't think like, you'd never even done a networking event.
No, yeah.
He didn't quite understand the concept.
The stories Jake told me about, or Frank, like what he was doing with the founders, going to these plush Mayfair hotels and restaurants. I think you said you stayed up in a hotel room, not even drinking, just talking about business.
When we done you hired out a suite in the Mayfair Hotel, and then is it Jason Bamford? What was
George Bamford.
Is this
George
the
Bamford.
watch guy?
Watch
George
guy,
Bamford,
yeah. Is he the grandson of the?
He's the grandson of
JCB
founder.
So he's a big dog. Like he's a serious guy.
So his father is Lord Bamford, you know, and they, I mean, obviously George is huge into his watches. That's what George's main business is.
That was one of the first ones.
That was one of the first
I went to, but I seen that the guy from Shazam. I can't remember his name.
Diraj, Mukherjee. But then you came to I know that you came to a lot of the meet and greets. There was a dinner with Atul.
Dinner with Atul, Bailey's as well.
Rebecca Jago.
The daughter of the founder of
Bailey's.
Bailey's.
Yeah.
Like these are all big things.
Big
like,
names.
Massive. Massive.
So what you started in 2020, founders. So have all of these people, a lot of them come through the magazine before, the Asian, and then obviously compounding effect of networking, or
I think the initial few people, the initial 50 people, came through obviously because of, you know, I called them.
Yeah.
I called them. I opened the book and I said, listen, you know, I know that this person, we can help this person with their business. And actually, I'll tell you what it was, Joe. Right, is that pre-COVID, when we had the magazine, we knew how to throw parties. We knew how to have fun, right? It was great fun. It was, you know, we'd chink a few glasses.
Through the magazine, would you be throwing networking events already? Parties or
not
networking, but meetups.
Networking events. You know, they would have these great parties.
Yeah.
You know? Got to a stage where we were like, okay, well, you know, what's beyond that? It's great to do that, don't get me wrong, but what's beyond that? And I think that's where the value came down. And actually, when we set up the Founders Club, it was very much, okay, well, how do we help people grow as better business people, better entrepreneurs, better humans? How do we help them? So when we first opened, we opened the book and I actually called, I picked out a whole bunch of people saying that, you know what, actually, I feel that we can help them, the club can help them. So those 50 people came on. And then since then, obviously, you know, we're now approaching 350 members now. And now people buy into who we are. Look, we didn't reinvent the wheel, right? The idea is not, you know, it was never to, you know, change, you know, completely.
You got the best wheel though. That's
for us it was like, okay, well, I'd been a member of so many clubs before. But there was
Take
always
little bits and pieces.
there was always things that I did like and certain things that I didn't like.
Yeah.
So for us it was like, okay, well, how do we do it? How do we create a club? How do we create a culture? And that people want to be part of. So that was kind of going back to what we were talking about. When you spoke to Krish, what we also say is that on one part, he's selling you the club, but at the same time, he's looking at you, how you are reacting and how you're behaving. And we have a rule in the club, right, which is very simple. If you ever feel like that person that you're speaking to, if you feel that they're ever going to embarrass themselves, embarrass you, or embarrass the club, they're not ready for the club. They're not right for the club, right? The other part is do they fit the culture of the club? And it goes back to like the end of the year party. When you guys came in, those were your people. Do you know what I mean? Those were your people. So you're like, doesn't matter who they were, what they were doing, you could easily just go up to anyone and say, you know, hi, how you doing?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And actually, so that, because we all belong to the same culture, we all, you know, we all think the same way. Do you see what I mean?
100%.
So that culture is so important.
Just touching on that culture as well. So I personally have been to networking events before, but I've never been to anything as unique and individual and, in my opinion, astute in terms of class levels as yours.
Yeah.
I've been to networking events and nothing wrong with it at all, but where you've got like Barry, the sole trader electrician, or, you know, on that level. So for business owners who are listening to this, how do you build a culture which is something as powerful as to what you've built in the Founders Club and also your previous businesses? What's like the key to the culture?
I'll add to that, on top of that, but what I find you do really well, I know it's in luxury places and stuff, but without being cringe, but having people feel so part of a club and so involved, but not trying to, especially when you first start, you see so many people trying to build a culture, especially on social media and stuff, where it becomes really quite cringy.
Yeah, it's like the family aspect you said as well.
Yeah.
I love that. You know, I think it must be quite hard to get right, maybe, or...
You know what, and it goes back to some of what I was saying is about, you know, people that we have in the club, you know, including yourselves, who, you know, it's very intellectual people. They're intelligent people. So what happens is that if Chris is speaking to someone and he gets the, you know, the view that actually this person just wants to sell their product or service, we'll probably have to politely reject that person, right? Because we don't have that culture.
You have to turn people down.
Oh yeah, 100%.
How many? Do you turn down a lot of people? Is it all the time?
I'll tell you what, the biggest reason why we turn people down is because of ego. Right? That's the reason, because people have this perception because of what we were doing yesterday with the magazine, and because we work with, you know, luxury brands, that they are expected to be a certain way or act a certain way or look a certain way, and that's not the case. So what happens is that sometimes, you know, we'll speak to people and we all know these people, right? Within the first 30 seconds, they'll tell you, you know, what car they drive, what they do, how much they earn, you know, where they go on holiday, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's cool for you, bro. But
Cool story, bro.
It's not, do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, but you know that actually that person is just going to rub other members up the wrong way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
100%.
Doesn't make them a bad person, but what it is when you're coming in with that energy and that the wrong culture. There have been a couple of people who, in the first couple of events, they're trying to sell their product or service, whatever. It was quite hard, but then they very quickly, and we didn't do anything, but very quickly they realised that nobody else in the room is doing that. Do you know what I mean? Because they're intelligent people. So you want to come in and say, listen, this is my business, this is what, you know, are you interested in buying this, are you interested in buying that? But by the time you attend event 3, 100% you won't be doing that, because you'll realise that nobody else is doing that, and it's starting to look embarrassing. And you'll learn, by default, what other people are doing. Do you know what I mean?
I can imagine because it's built on relationships. Sorry, Luke.
Yeah, hard, isn't it?
Because it's built on relationships, right? And with relationships, naturally come business opportunities. So I'm sure that naturally happens because of the culture you've built there, right? Like, do you have a lot of collabs within the club,
100%.
outside of the club?
100%. And actually, I would, and I always actually say, I'm not just saying that because he's sitting here, but he's probably one of our biggest kind of ambassadors of that, right? Because Frank, 2 years now, 1.5, 2 years?
I think I started nearly 2 years. I've been.
Yeah, right. So,
I think I was one of the original. Was I one of the?
One of the earlier, you know, founding members, and I was like, it's really interesting because some people really stand out, right? Stand out in the sense that they've done very well out of the club, right? And not down to the club, it's down to them, right? So there's a few people. It's like every now and then I'll come across someone. I said, oh yeah, Frank looks after. Only recently, Greg. Greg, yeah, Frank looks after all of my.
You've been in touch with him.
Yeah, but you know, it's like you didn't even know that he was a member of the club because the guy never hardly ever turns up. Right?
Yeah.
But
is that the South African guy we were speaking about earlier?
Yes,
we met him, and he bought
your
your magazine, did he?
So he's one of my good friends. He used to be our head of sales for the magazine, and actually he acquired it. So
the Age and Wealth.
No, the Oil and Gas magazine.
Did you sell the Asian Wealth as well?
No, so that's still, so we still have that, but
right.
we moved everything online, and you know it's still there, it's still live, but 99% of our attention now is on the club and Capital 36. So you know, so we use it every now and then, but we still have it. I know I took it to here, and actually it was going like that because I'd lost interest, and actually when I sold it to Greg, I knew Greg.
Smash it.
And actually, even now, I know that Greg has kind of increased that 10 times over.
Nice.
So we know now that actually, even though I've got a small share in it, and the share is actually, once Greg sells it, I know I would never have been able to do that because my interest was always in other places. Do you see what I mean?
It's the entrepreneur.
And Greg's attention is laser focused on his industry, you know. So I know that he is now we're getting offers, or he's getting offers, right, to buy him out in the.
How long has he had it for now?
Probably about 2017. 2016, 2017, I sold it to him. Yeah.
So he's actually been there for longer because he was working there. Okay, cool. And he's still got that fire for it.
He's still got it. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he still talks to me about it, and I still get bored. And it's, you know, you have to really be, if somebody starts talking to you about, you know, coupling equipment in the oil and gas industry, you've got to be seriously, you know, interested in that. But, yeah.
Well, so in terms of, obviously you sold that for a good number. Was that you and your brother as well?
Yeah, so everything Sonny and I have done, we've always done it together.
Yeah, so obviously it's a good number to sell for, but have you always been in property? Like most of your money that you've acquired up to date, obviously it's not come, I'm guessing, from the sale of that, or did you use that money to invest? Was you already in property?
Property has always been a keen interest for us.
Yeah.
And look, and even if we're being completely honest here, right? So even with the club, right? Our big money comes from property, right?
Yeah.
Our big money comes from property, and the club is a conduit, right, for us, because what it does, it don't get me wrong, we make money in the club and we have great fun doing it, but the biggest thing is it opens up all the doors. You know, so yesterday when we had Asian Wealth, that opened up a lot of doors. Now the club opens up a lot of doors. So now we get deals, property deals coming via the club. It comes to us before it hits the market. Do you know what I mean? So for us, actually, and we do a lot of business internally as well, right? So going back to kind of what you were saying is that, you know, we do a lot of business internally. So we work with other developers. You know, we work with. So there's a lot of high net worth individuals as members who are investors. So they invest into the property deals that we've got. You know, so there is that whole kind of element of kind of.
And where you're the main man, everyone comes to you, and you're very much like that at the events.
Everyone knows him.
Everyone comes to you in just a friendly face.
Way too kind.
We went to an event on Saturday. The DJ just come up to him, just knew him. We was in West London.
But naturally, though,
But
then
East
all
London,
the
sorry.
opportunities.
DJ knew him.
It feels like, I don't know if I've been in marketing too long, but you've built a real life landing page where people just come to you with business ideas.
But you know what it is that. And I always say that, you know, nobody's ever perfect, right? And when you know your lane, like for me, I'm a real kind of relationship person, right? So I like to build relationships. I like to do this. I like to sit and I like to have conversations, and I've learned a few things along the way. So I like to share that stuff, right? You know, sure, you know, I've got to do the other stuff as well, but there's stuff that I don't enjoy. There's stuff that I'm not good at, right? If you ever send me a spreadsheet and call me at 5 o'clock and say, KP, open that spreadsheet, let's go through it, I'll just hang up the phone on you. You know what I mean? I'm not interested. So if you want to talk numbers stuff with me, it has to be literally before 11 o'clock. Otherwise, you will not have my attention. You know what I mean? So that's why me and Sonny, sometimes we lock horns on it, because Sonny is, I always say to, and I said it many a times, like, so Sonny is the strategic, analytical one in the business. I'm the creative, emotional one. You need to have these kind of yin and yang, you know, to bounce off each other. But once you know that lane, you can excel in that. And for me, I know that not only am I good at building relationships, I enjoy it, right? And that's what I do. You know, that's basically, you know, that's where I excel.
Excellent, man. I know Luke normally has a question before we wrap up a podcast. What question is that?
I have a couple questions. Cool. First question is, what is your number one winning habit?
My number one winning habit is 100% a positive mindset. 100%. I've actually even recently heard that having a positive mindset can affect your health in a positive way as well.
Sure,
you know, so sometimes, like, all of us will have really rough days, really hard days. But I wake up every morning and I'm like, today's a new day and let's go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So my mindset is probably the...
Staying optimistic for the
100%.
future always.
Yeah. And the other, you know, part of that is I built my world around it. So I don't have not one negative person in my life. I won't allow it.
Yeah.
If I don't like your energy, that's good in you, but you're not going to be in my world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't have one. And there's a lot of people, obviously not just the club, but even personally, there's a lot of people I know, but I won't have not one negative person in my life. I won't allow it.
That's good. And the next one is, what have you got a winning habit that you're trying to achieve or want, but you just haven't?
100%.
Yeah.
I've got loads of them. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to excel at loads of stuff. You know, I'll tell you what it is. One of the things that I've really struggled with is organisation. I used to be really organised. Used to be really, you know, and this might be something, you know, I guess for your listeners as well, because I used to be really organised when the business was much smaller. But as the business has grown, there is where I really struggle is I've got 100 things on my plate. So sometimes what happens is I struggle to see the wood through the trees. I'm like, you know, I've got all this stuff on my plate and like, where the fuck do I start? Do you know what I mean? And sometimes people will come up and say, well, start at the beginning, and then, but there is no beginning. Start with the most important stuff. Well, it's all fucking important. So it's like,
That's a common
problem. It's
Every
a
day.
big, so I've always struggled.
How did you?
Yeah, so you look at it and you think, okay, well, there's 50 things here, and they're all important. Someone says to me, okay, well, look, you know that grid, you've got important, urgent, you know, that like. Well, I say, well, what if it's fucking all important and all urgent? Do you know what I mean? It's like, and especially when you're at the helm of the ship. When you're at the helm of the ship and everyone's coming to you for stuff, you know, and you know it's important, right? You're like, okay. So that's what I'm learning now more so, is actually I'm very conscious with even the team. Like this morning, I was having a chat with Sonny, and he was saying, KP, don't forget this. What we need to do, this. By the time we got to point 4, I said, stop, don't tell me anymore, because listen, you've told me these things and I know it's on my radar now. So what I consciously do is I will pick, and this is kind of going back to that whole disconnection thing, is that I will look at my to-do list and then I'll pick 2 or 3 things and then I'll put the rest of it, and I will, you know, try my absolute best to disconnect from it. Just, do you know what I mean? Even to the point where even the team, I've said, listen, guys, you know, don't just call me ad hoc. Do you know what I mean? If you want my full attention, because you can call me and I'll pick up the phone and, you know, you'll tell me something and 30 seconds later I've forgotten about it. Do you know what I mean? If you want my full attention, let's lock it in. Tell me. Let's have a Zoom if you want. Do you know what I mean? And I'll give you an hour of my time. But that organisation, you know, is so key. So that's where actually I've struggled over the last few years, and I've got a great team that they always pick up the slack. The slack always comes from me, basically. Do you know what I mean?
Delegation.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's somewhere where I'm really trying to.
I was going to say, do you not find your assistant helps with like get them to schedule your to-do list and your thing, or is it you are the one that knows?
Yeah, you know what it is that no, I'm the one who knows, and I'll tell you why. And I think I struggle with, and I'm sure other people struggle with this as well, is that you may say, right, okay, here's my list of 50 things, I'm going to pick 4 things. Out of those 4 things, I'm going to do this, and this, and this. You'll do number 1, and by number 2, you're like, you'll start procrastinating, you're like, man,
Someone else comes
That
in
one
as
can
well.
let me make a coffee
That
or let
one
me
can
post something
wait.
on Instagram or do you know what I mean? It's like so even though you know that is important, you'll start making excuses to do something else. There was something I saw recently, which was, and I can't remember the exact definition for it, but it was something about behavior, your mental behavior in terms of your actions as well. And what it was saying is that even if you're procrastinating, right, on something, force yourself to start it because your mind will catch up. Do you know what I mean? So even if you're thinking, right, I've got to do this, let's say marketing plan or something like that, right? And you really don't want to do it, so you're making any excuses, do you know what I mean? Yeah, do you know what I mean? It's like, start it, just start it, and 5-10 minutes in, the rest of your brain and your mind will catch up.
Just kick
It will
in.
catch up, and then, do you know what I mean? So that's why I'm trying every trick in the trade to get there.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's literally probably what everyone's going through.
Relatable.
So
Every day,
relatable,
my friend the other day he came round and he saw my to-do list, and literally, so I'd wrote my to-do list, and then after exactly that, I thought, what's important? I thought, right, I'm gonna do it. So star, but I'd done like 5 stars. Then I'd had double stars next to those. And then like by the end, like the whole page was just starred.
Yeah,
like, and I had a
yeah.
few things double starred. He's like, what the fuck is that?
Because everything is important. You're not going to put it on your list unless it's important, right?
Yeah.
So everything is important. It's just, taking 2 or 3 things, and it goes back to that moving the needle.
Yeah.
2 or 3. If you actually strip back your to-do list, you'll realise that actually there's only probably about 25% of it that is really going to make a
It's.
big impact.
I was going to say the 80-20. You said 25 there, but yeah, the 80-20 we spoke about earlier. I actually read that in Sell Like Crazy by Sabri Subi. Like he said, if you really want to focus in, you do 80-20 and you do 80-20 again on that 20.
Yeah.
And he said that is probably what's really generating your business money. He said focus on that. Otherwise, you can spend all of your time running around trying to whatever it may be in each business. A lot of admin for you, Jake, and a lot of for me dealing with clients, emailing clients, doing orders and for materials and stuff like that. But it's an important part of the business. And if I stop that, you're going to lose client stuff. But other people can service that. What's actually going to generate revenue and scale up your business, that's where you need to be focusing your time and energy and try and just get your to-do lists.
Yeah.
It's going to take time and it's going to take recruiting, it's going to take building a good team, but hopefully over time you can just focus.
Thank you very much.
Sure, KP, it's been a pleasure, man.
Yeah, absolute pleasure.
Very interesting guy.
It will be
Thank
mine. A pleasure. It will be mine. I knew I'd enjoy this one. Just
You've got a little
chewing the fat with you guys.
show the cameras.
Oh, bless you.
Nice
bless
and
you.
grounded.
Thank you so much.
Just a little something. Thank you very much for coming on.
Go pop
KP.
that your next biggest
We're,
milestone, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think
There's
we
one
should
coming up.
Pop it together, right? So yeah, where's the one coming up? I don't know.
Cigar and whiskey next
Oh, yes,
Thursday.
yeah,
I'm looking
yeah,
forward to that
yeah,
one.
yeah,
I don't like
cigar.
whiskey, but it's going to be cool anyway.
Actually, you know what? We've changed it to rum.
I don't like rum either. But I'll drink it anyway. and I'll have a
no,
cigar.
thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you,
guys, for
thanks.
having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for the conversation as well. So
Perfect.
the pleasure was all mine.
Much
Thank you very
appreciated.
much.